On this episode of the show, I have with me Tai Wong. He is co-founder and CEO at Angle Health, and we're going to be talking about giving back through public service. So Ty's going to tell us a little bit about what that means to him and his own personal story in launching Angle Health, and we'll talk a little bit about how he's trying to modernize something that has been probably top of mind for everyone, or at least everyone's heard about these problems, and Ty's taking them on, and we're going to ask him how he's doing that and talk a little bit about technology infrastructure in there as well. We got a lot to cover, but Ty, thanks for the time.
Hey, Amir, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. All right, before we start, the company, Angle Health, what do you guys do?
Yeah, so Angle Health is really the first AI native vertically integrated health plan. And I would say we're probably one of the fastest growing healthcare companies in the country as well. What that really means, so our products are fully customizable major medical health plans, all ACA compliant and primarily tailored to small and medium sized businesses. And what we're delivering are these kind of Fortune 100 level healthcare benefits to your local businesses. So with Angle Health, brokers and their small employer clients can build these kinds of custom health plans, just like how a major employer with thousands or tens of thousands of employees and a large sophisticated benefits team might do it. And we're unlocking those same capabilities and the same level of customization and personalization all the way down to the smallest local businesses.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, we'll definitely get into that as well. I guess just we'll start at the top. I mentioned giving back through public service. Obviously, I think the kind of public service that people think about could be a variety of things. I think what you're doing is a public service in a way as well. But your story kind of starts actually in public service. I love it if you could kind of explain a little bit about that before we get too far into Angle Health.
Yeah, I started my career in public service, and I would say I've always had a strong desire to do that and to really give back to the country, because it is what has given me the life that I have today. And even so originally it first started. So I was originally planning to attend the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, and I went through the entire process of that application, which is pretty lengthy. I mean, it happens in your senior year of college. I secured 2 congressional nominations from one from my state representative and one from one of our state senators, which is a requirement there. And that was the plan, at least until I was approached by a different part of the U.S. government to join this really a little known scholarship program, where they essentially recruited 10 to 15 people a year out of high school during their senior year of high school, and offered a full tuition scholarship as long as you majored in a field that the U.S. government considered important. So at the time, it included things like math, computer science, engineering, certain languages, and other types of applied science degrees. So I ended up taking that scholarship, and as part of that deal, you also received a full-time role with the federal government after graduating, and that's how I ended up starting in public service, and ultimately what led me over to Palantir.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a really cool trajectory, and I guess starting a healthcare company. When it comes to the idea, when it comes to why this business is there a particular reason? Is it obviously I know you like to give back to public service, but is there something beyond that?
Yeah, this mission. I would say that Angle Health is a very mission driven company, and that's a reflection of kind of the values that myself and my co-founder bring. So I was born into a hardworking blue collar household. My parents, they grew up during the Cultural Revolution in China. They were pulled out of elementary school to go work in fields and in factories. And as soon as China reopened to the world, they left and immigrated here to the US with nothing. And that was 40 years ago now. They were the kinds of people that they each worked multiple full-time jobs. My mom worked in supermarket bakeries. She waited tables at Denny's. My dad delivered food and stocked grocery store shelves. And they made it work for my sister and I. We're kind of the poster children for the American dream, where my sister is now a doctor and I have the privilege of being an entrepreneur out of choice. And I feel a great deal of kind of gratitude and debt to the country for providing us with that kind of opportunity. And I've always wanted to ensure that people continue to have that same opportunity to realize the American dream, whether it's strengthening American influence and protecting our Western ideals and freedoms through national security work and through public service, or ensuring that Americans have a fair shot at that dream. Because the reality is that sometimes things happen that are just out of your control. Not everyone is as lucky as my parents. You can end up with or have unmanaged or unknown hereditary diseases, freak accidents, whatever can pop up. And suddenly, especially if you don't have access to regular preventative care, and especially if you can't afford the financial backstop of things like health insurance, your medical bills pile up, parents are out of work, and suddenly the family is in a hole that's almost impossible to dig out of today. But we have the tools to mitigate that and to prevent these things from happening. We just need to make sure that everyone has access to them. And it really starts with being able to provide affordable healthcare and that kind of affordable backstop to Americans and to families. So that to your kind of original question as well. So my parents, they worked extremely hard and they made it work. But they were the kinds of people that couldn't afford to take time off work to go to in-person doctor's appointments. There were language barriers. They had minimal healthcare literacy, and we got lucky that our family never faced these kinds of serious or major health situations. And it wasn't until arriving at Palantir, which is where my co-founder Anirban and I were before we started Angle Health. It's one of the largest tech companies in the world now. That there is where we realized the true disparity when it came to the availability of and really the access to these kinds of modern healthcare services. And over the last 10, 15 years now, there's been this explosion of new ways of receiving medical services, and things like telehealth, telemedicine, chronic disease management programs, behavioral health programs. Many of these are clinical programs, but unless you're lucky enough to work for a big tech company or a large financial institution, a law firm, these kinds of white collar firms, these services are still largely inaccessible to the vast majority of Americans. And that's especially true of the ones that actually need more accessible care, like my parents, because these are people where taking a day off work could mean losing a day of food or even potentially losing their jobs. And that's really why we're focused on SMBs as well. We realized that the only way to democratize access to these kinds of modern healthcare services was to fundamentally rebuild the system from the ground up. That's what we're doing with Angle Health, and we're focusing on these SMBs because it's really the large part of the population that's often forgotten or taken advantage of by the legacy incumbents. Small businesses are impacted most heavily by these macro trends of increasing healthcare costs, and they make up the vast majority of businesses in the US. They employ nearly half of the American workforce, yet they're the ones with the most limited set of options when it comes to things like healthcare coverage, and also the least amount of transparency and least control over its costs.
I love it. I guess a question for you, this is a very complex industry. It's called broken by many. You're deciding this is a place where you want to bring about a product that is underserving a community, the segment of the potential market. Like the complexity that goes into this, I guess, for people who don't deal with healthcare plans and this type of industry, like talk to us a little bit about what makes it so complex. Because I guess you've gone through, you were a Palantir, but to go into healthcare and untangle that seems really complicated to me.
Yeah. I mean, it is complex, and we saw how many of these massive organizations operated at our time at Palantir, and the kind of inherent problems and inefficiencies that result from decades of M&A. I mean, the problems are very much known. It's things like siloed data. It's things like having countless systems that are supposed to have the same function or store the same data, but is inconsistent across them, and the resulting inability to answer some of the most basic questions or really deliver kind of any semblance of a user experience. And I think that's what people experience within the healthcare and the health plan experience today. And we when we left, we set out to really kind of rebuild that underlying healthcare infrastructure on modern technology. So that means building with highly integrated, very centralized data assets, and as a result, also being able to build in these AI-driven, human-in-the-loop workflows that are core to our operations today.
Absolutely. And when you're looking at that segment, and you're talking about the ability to bring a product to small businesses, small, medium-sized businesses that they I have a small business, and I could tell you when you mentioned, I don't have access to some plans. It's true. I can't. Sometimes, it's frustrating. What within the system are you doing different that allows you to do what they can't do? Is it economies of scale? Is it modernization? Like what makes it so hard for them to do what you've brought to market?
Yeah, that's a great question. The biggest thing there is that the kinds of products and the kinds of services that we're bringing down to these small and medium-sized businesses, a lot of times they're not necessarily new services. They're tools and products and services and programs that have been available to large employers for a long time now, but they still are for most legacy health plans and third-party administrators and insurers. They're cost prohibitive or impossible for them to bring to the SMBs because the amount of manual work that's involved in kind of configuring and administering these very custom, these very personalized products. Because of this modern infrastructure that we've built, because of this highly integrated data and highly integrated systems that allow us to incorporate these kinds of products and services, these kinds of clinical programs, these kinds of administrative or financial efficiencies, we're able to bring that all the way down to these small and medium-sized businesses that historically haven't had access to those products. So that's I would say really core to it. And I would say the problem, there's a lot of problems with the healthcare system today, and when it comes to this segment with small businesses, this is important because the problem isn't, and what we're delivering to them is important because the problem isn't just that costs are going up. I think everyone is already conditioned for that. Everyone understands that their healthcare costs are going to go up, along with most other costs year over year. But the problem is that for small businesses, there's absolutely no transparency or predictability when it comes to what those costs are going to look like, what their rates are going to be, until like 3 weeks or a couple weeks leading up to the end of the year or to their renewal cycle. And that makes it really hard for a small business to plan. For many of these businesses, health insurance is the second or third largest line item after payroll on their P&L. And when you don't know if you're going to get a 5% or a 50% rate increase year over year, that puts a lot of strain on the organization, especially if you end up on the higher end of that. And incumbents really gatekeep the data and the information needed to really understand those costs. And they don't want you to have that data because they don't want you to know what your true healthcare costs are and where those dollars are going. And ultimately, that's the problem that we're solving. We've really flipped that model on its head. So whether or not a broker or employer goes with Angle Health, we still share this comprehensive breakdown that we call the Angle Health scorecard in a de-identified, HIPAA-compliant way. We break down the employer's healthcare costs, their underlying risks, using Angle's precision risk model, and are really transparent with them about exactly what they should expect. And then we also loop in these kinds of programs that we've mentioned and services like Angle Advocacy, which is our concierge care navigation service. And through all of this, we're really proud to say that we truly have industry leading renewal rates, as well as some of the lowest rate increases, some of the most cost stable health plans on the market today.
And I guess to kind of, extend that conversation, as you've kind of been speaking about bringing about this, this change, bringing this product to market, when we do look at the incumbents and I guess the size that they have, the ability to have all this data, they have all these systems in place. I guess when we look at companies, especially startups that are modernizing, I guess there's a distinct, there's a bit of a, one set has all this data and has all the relationships and has all this overhead. The other is you're agile, you're nimble, you're learning and growing with the industry. I do find it very interesting that in terms of modernization, and we're looking at a lot of these, insurance has it right now, health tech is seeing it right now. We're seeing startups pick particular niches and go, there's the gap, and that's where I can exploit. When you look at small, medium business, I guess, as that serving an underserved demographic, do you have to stop there? Is it a case that if you get that right, you can go after maybe the more lucrative, more robust packages that those larger companies do get? Is that a potential, or is it we're solving a problem for a particular area, and once you get that, it is complicated, and maybe you don't want to touch the other area.
So it's a great question. So to answer that directly, what we've built, the infrastructure and technology that we've built, does not just apply to these small and medium-sized businesses. We're really rebuilding underlying healthcare infrastructure from the ground up. And today our engineering and product teams are solving some of the most difficult, most impactful problems that exist in healthcare. And they're building the bleeding edge technology to do it. So that includes problems across risk and underwriting, across claims, administrative workflows, clinical workflows, things like patient and member engagement, and many others. And they're building the AI models that are trained on these millions of de-identified patient records and other data points that have an immediate kind of tangible impact on hundreds of thousands and hopefully millions of Americans. And when we talk about the specific market niche that we're in with these small and medium-sized businesses, we can very easily expand and move into different lines of products within the health plan or the healthcare space. And even today, we have our healthcare services business now, and our products around Angle Advocacy, around our care navigation, care management programs. But we don't really need to move out of the SMB space or the small business space today, because there's no reason to. We're growing so quickly within that space. We're addressing a very core need. And this is a space that represents almost half of working Americans. We're talking about 60 plus million Americans and their families that are that currently get their health care and their health plans from the small businesses that they work for. And that's already a massive market.
Definitely, it's without a doubt a huge market, as is. I guess, maybe if you could, and we don't necessarily need to know the secret sauce, but when you are moving into an industry like this, where it is a very complex, it's highly regulated. There's definitely, there's a per state also shift within regulations. It's not just a federal thing. So when you are moving into a space like that, are there things you've learned along? I'm sure there is. So this is ridiculous. That's ridiculous. But what are some of the things that going into a regulated industry like this, you might have learned you have to deal with that maybe in another industry you wouldn't have had to have worried about?
Yeah. So we are in a highly regulated industry, and I would say we have generally strong relationships with our regulators, and regulators are, like you mentioned, on the insurance side are state by state, and then there are major federal regulators as well. And we don't view it. We really don't view it as something that we have to deal with. We really view it as an opportunity, and our engagement with regulators is extremely collaborative. We are really we view it as an opportunity to help really transform the landscape, transform the regulatory landscape in the industry to be able to deliver much more transparent, much more affordable, and greater options and products for consumers, which is at the end of the day much of the primary concern for most regulators is that consumer protection aspect, and that's really how we view it. And of course, there's lots of challenges when it came to when we were first starting the company and starting it in such a regulated space. We relied on a lot of experts. We learned a lot ourselves, and it's also important for a business like ours, especially when we were starting, that especially one that is such a impact on the financial and the health well-being of users, of customers, that the company was credible and financially sustainable. So we have had to raise a couple rounds of funding early on that I think were probably larger than, well, maybe not today with these massive AI raises, but at the time, definitely I think we're larger early stage rounds. So, and that was hard too. It's not a sexy industry, but it is an extremely impactful one. And it is, I think, for the people that really understand it, especially for some of the best technical and engineering talent, you really are working on some of the hardest technical problems out there. And there's a reason that these problems haven't been solved before.
I love that. I was going to ask you, maybe as just to kind of tie a few things. When you are looking at, especially on the hiring side, we're seeing all these AI companies. I mean, you guys are using very advanced technologies in building the product. There's a lot of stuff that probably needs similar skill sets. When you are going up and competing against an AI company looking for similar type hires, how do you position the story? I mean, I have an idea. I mean, there's a couple of different ways you go, but it is a big industry. It is not sexy for sure, but it touches every single person that exists in the country pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we look for. Very high agency, very mission driven people. And like I mentioned before, our engineering teams are solving some of the most difficult, some of the most impactful problems that exist in our society today. And we are fundamentally changing the way that people approach and access healthcare. And not only is the impact large on at a high level like that, but the work that our team, and this is true of not just our engineering team, but across the board, our sales and marketing teams, our operations teams, their work has immediate tangible impacts on our customers, on our members, and our employers and our brokers, and I think that's really important to a lot of people. And I think that we're building a company in one of, if not the largest industry in the country and potentially the world. So there's also the opportunity to create something massively valuable, and we're building a generational company here at Angle Health, and we're doing it with a very lean team, and I think all of those are really appealing to the best talent out there.
I love it. Ty, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for sharing with us. If somebody does want to ask you a follow-up, if they had a question, what's a good way of connecting with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Connecting with me on LinkedIn is great. If there's anyone interested in open roles, and we're constantly hiring on the product and engineering side, please feel free to apply online at careers.anglehealth.com or to reach out at careers@anglehealth.com.
Absolutely. Definitely appreciate your time, Ty. Thanks for sharing.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Amir. This is fun.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for this episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. I think Ty did an awesome job walking us through his why and his time in public service and trying to give back. I think it was awesome to hear how he views the startup he's building, and he is serving a super underserved part of the healthcare market. So hopefully they will continue to grow and do all the good things there. And share this episode with somebody else who would enjoy hearing the story. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.